Welcome to Soul Thrive, where we explore spirituality through healing trauma, shadow work, and applying the laws of the universe in order to master ourselves without the fear of the unknown. Hey guys, welcome to Soul Thrive. It's Christina.
And Ivana.
We're so excited because today we're going to talk about
enmeshment trauma. Woo! So excited to talk about it.
Anyways, let's get into it.
We've worked a lot on it over the last few weeks.
We really
had some
have
realizations. I'm excited to
not only just that. However, we've been doing an 8-week program on shifting your reality from 3D to 4D. And I recently just did the workshop on enmeshment in Soul Thrive. And so that's a great add-on to the 8-week program that we've been doing. And oh my God, the shifts that people have been making have been phenomenal. It has been really amazing to see just the perspectives on change so much.
I told someone at work the other day that you're looking at this problem from a third dimensional perspective and you need to move up to the fourth. And they're like, cool. I'll try GPT what that means.
Fantastic.
People are open to it.
I love it. So why don't we get into it?
Let's get into it. So I've recently realized that we can subconsciously push away relationships and not even know it. Like, not all fear of love is fear of commitment. Not everything is about avoidant attachment. That's like all I've been reading on Instagram. Mm-hmm. It's like we can also push love away for other reasons. Yeah,
there are many reasons. Sometimes you're not avoiding just the connection aspect of things, but the main component is like you may be avoiding losing yourself in those types of relationship dynamics. And it could feel like very confusing. It could really make you even feel like in relationships that your nervous system can dysregulate itself, and you could feel like non-supportive. Like in general, it feels like a threat to your whole entire being at the end of the day, which goes into the conversation that you and I are going to have today, because realistically speaking,
it's enmeshment trauma.
It is enmeshment trauma.
Right. And I know that, for example, as a child, if your emotional world has been entangled with a parent, or you learn to prioritize their moods over your own, or you have to perform or manage their emotions in order to feel some kind of sense of love or safety, or you're working on eggshells, or you abandon your boundaries to maintain peace. It's almost like you're not seen as your own person. You are almost like an extension of them. So that totally makes sense. Why then love would feel so almost dangerous to you.
Yeah. I mean, you tend to learn that's your first type of experience with yourself. How you're going to build trust in these types of dynamics. Everyone's always kind of looking at it and saying I don't know how to trust myself, but that's because you've learned to abandon yourself and you've prioritized chaos over your circumstances and not really have an awareness of what your feelings are, or how to reset yourself, or not even register how you're reacting from your past, your past experiences from your childhood, because that's where enmeshment trauma kind of stems from at the end of the day. So it's really about teaching you how to learn how to speak up, how to set clear boundaries, how to feel safe in your circumstances. And, I really want to create a understanding. I mean, we did the workshop in Soul Thrive. We talked a lot about enmeshment trauma, and everyone just had a moment where they had to reassess and pause and become aware. Oh my God, I know exactly what this feels like. And this is probably why I have such a hard time with connection,
or even attracting relationships, because subconsciously, if you're so scared of it, you're not gonna attract it, or you're gonna attract the same types of partner. So I know you we were talking about if you actually try to exercise real boundaries in a relationship and they have a reaction to that.
Yeah, I mean, the unfortunate aspect of those things is that you've developed a codependency, and your heightened awareness with that type of style of trauma, it becomes your way of operating. It's prioritizing them, prioritizing their needs, prioritizing their wants, so at the beginning, you're all in that way where you're kind of focusing on that type of false sense of connection, because that's all you know. You really just know from your own childhood, most likely the parent dynamic that you had in your childhood, that has created this cyclical pattern within you. And now you only know that's your adaptation. So when you get into relationships, you're all about them.
Right.
right?
Right.
How can I give you this? How can I support you with this? How can I make this better for you? And then you're waiting for the response as well. You're queuing in to the degree where you have self-abandoned to prioritize whatever that person's mood, behavior, actions, wants, desires actually are. And so it gets really confusing when you start to get depleted because you get very drained. And then you're like, I don't understand why my needs are not getting met in this relationship dynamic. I don't understand why I'm always self-sacrificing, but you're not registering that you've self-abandoned and you've enmeshed
with
in
a person.
that relationship.
Because that's all you know.
That's all you know. Yeah.
So I guess if you do attract that type of person and who's like, no, you need to be enmeshed with me, you're essentially, the universe has brought you to that relationship to realize, oh my God, this is like my childhood all over again. You need to resolve it. And you need to like no longer experience that same pattern from your childhood. So what do? I guess
before that, I think, yeah, you could, but I think what people need to comprehend first is that they've developed a specific way of operating. And so if you have, like, let's say with enmeshment, you would innately develop people-pleasing tendencies. So it's going to be very difficult for you to kind of figure out your emotions versus their own emotions because you're so enmeshed in these types of behavior patterns that you don't register what's mine and what's yours. I can't tell the difference anymore. I'm very confused in what you're saying to me and how you're trying to express your clarity in like the relationship dynamic, because the way that enmeshment works, it's the programming is that now all of your stuff is my stuff. I can't separate from that. And so when someone's trying to get away from a relationship dynamic like that, they have to register that they have a difficulty addressing their emotions. They have a difficulty addressing their desires and their needs. They are chronic people pleasers. They do fear, like, at the end of the day, disappointing people. So it's a lot harder to get out of that dynamic. And so it's easier not to get in the relationship.
Right.
You know, when people are like, I'm scared of commitment, or I'm worried about these types of attachments.
It's because you've had so much of that over the years that you're like, oh my God, I'd rather almost be, there's a part of you that would rather be alone
than be in something,
than go be in something
to lose yourself
like
all over again. Because you do have like an awareness that there is a part of you that loses yourself in these relationship dynamics. But if you understood enmeshment and you understood that now you've just taken on the personality, the traits, like a lot of people tend to do this when they have low self-esteem because there was no autonomy. There was no opportunity for a child to discern, to say no, to execute boundaries, because really it was about the parent's mood, the parent's behavior, the parent's way of parenting, the burdens that they felt, and like how the parent didn't know how to self-regulate and heal their own emotions and take accountability. So the child just kind of sits there and was watching the cue of the parent. And then eventually, even when we talk about individuals who have like empath energy and they're like, I'm an empath, I would really get you to evaluate if you are in enmeshment trauma instead, because you definitely don't want, you can have empathy towards people, but you definitely don't want to be lost in people's emotions, feelings, thoughts, and experiences, because then there's no individuality. You don't know how to separate yourself from that. That's why I've always said, like, even when everyone says like I'm an empath, I'm like, ooh, that's a big mommy wound. Like I'm always looking at that because it really is an enmeshment trauma. And I will say, for the most part, when I've been doing and working with clients for a very long, I have been working with clients for a very long time. When I'm looking at the enmeshment trauma, it really is a relationship dynamic between them and their mother.
The mom. Yeah.
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 Now, here are some things that I also want individuals to know. Here's are the behavioral aspects that I feel people have to become aware of when it comes to seeing whether or not you have a really hard time breaking this type of enmeshment trauma. Okay. So the first thing is like you overshare or you emotionally fuse in relationships. You feel emotionally drained after your interactions with people. That's kind of one of those aspects of too. You have a really hard time with conflict.
Right.
And you'll avoid it completely because you'd rather abandon yourself than actually deal with whatever it is that you need.
Because nobody has taught you how to resolve conflict in a healthy way. Because if you're always seen as an extension of your parent, it's like you don't have, there is no like two sides coming together to have a conversation.
Not
it's like,
at all.
You're just that's it. Like you're just here. You can't even say no to what I have to say.
I know you'll have a hard time holding your boundaries because you fear you're going to be abandoned if you do.
Right. But so if we are in a relationship where the other person is like, well, then whatever, I will, like, I don't accept this. Like, you have to continue this behavior. So basically you've attracted someone like your parent or like your mother to ultimately, one, recognize the dynamic that you're in, and then two, choose something different. Like you can't keep going towards the same behavior. And then three, really learn how to trust yourself, because I think that fear of getting into the next relationship is the hardest one, because you really have to develop that trust within yourself to say, one, I'll be able to recognize that when it happens again. Two, I'll be able to hold my ground. And three, I know that I'll be okay if it ends again.
Yeah, but that takes a lot of work because you have to register the dysregulation in your nervous system. And you have to have a really good sense of who you are through that process. And so starting off with setting those boundaries and becoming aware, even just like what's mine, what's yours, and then taking that pause to reset and think things through before a response or urgency, that urgency to like fix it, to make it better, to like, oh my God, I don't want to like upset you. And it's like, it's okay to upset people. It's okay to make them feel whatever it is that you're going through, but you have to discern what is yours and what is somebody else's.
But it's crazy. You can't be in a relationship with someone that you can't upset. What is that?
Well,
like
that's exactly what happened with their parent.
Right.
Think about that, right? They weren't allowed to choose to set a boundary, to desire something or prioritize their need without like checking in to make sure that it's okay for
that the parent will give approval. Yeah. No, that's why I think sometimes I wonder, when I think about in the past, conflict felt like death.
Yeah.
Like it would feel like the end of the world. And it wasn't until I had to face like some pretty intense conflicts at work. I think that was the beginning of my like relationship with conflict.
Yeah.
Resolution.
Yeah. I think it's important to understand that the better you get at conflict resolve, because really it's just a conflict internally at the end of the day. We've discussed this in previous workshops. We talked about like the internal struggle, the internal conflict. But when you get better at understanding what your personal needs are and you're not going to self-abandon, then what are your personal needs? And what are your personal boundaries? Like, I think what people don't register to is with enmeshment trauma, you are operating with immense guilt too.
Right.
And so one of the fundamental things that I tell people is like, everyone's like, how do I set a boundary? I'm like, first you have to understand how you self-abandon. Then you have to understand what you feel a need is.
Right.
Then you have to understand what you feel guilty about.
Right.
And then once you understand those three factors, and you can write them on pen and paper, sit down and write this out for yourself so you can get clear on what your personal boundaries are. Then you have the opportunity to kind of set a boundary for yourself that you're never going to violate within yourself.
Can we work through that example? I think that would be really interesting.
So think about that.
So what was it? Step one was, what is your need?
No,
right?
Step one is, how do you abandon yourself?
Right.
So you got to think about this for a second. So for instance, if you are someone who prioritizes work far more than you prioritize your health, right? So that's a means of abandoning yourself. What's the need? Why do you need to do that? Number one. And also, what are your overall needs in general? So if you could define those two aspects, it's going to give you a little bit more context. It's going to give you a little bit more of an understanding as to why you're doing the thing that you're doing and why you're self-abandoning.
Okay. So if I think back like a few years ago, I think I was more so in that position where I was prioritizing work more over my personal life. And I feel like that was because...
What's the need?
Validation, because I think work was one of those aspects of my life that was giving me validation because I was advancing, and it was like, oh look, external confirmation that I matter. So and if it's the only source of validation, you're going to prioritize that, right?
What do you feel guilty about?
abandoning myself because that's when my scoliosis and my back pain and my neck pain were the worst.
Okay, but what do you feel guilty about? Like you're communicating correctly where you're saying, I register, you went a level deeper. I register that I had a physical response, and you will, guys. This is another thing when it comes to like losing yourself and enmeshed in other things and self-abandoning, and you're going to see your body's going to have a reaction to certain stuff. And so physical symptoms will arise, such as like back pain, neck pain, lack of support. What do you feel guilty about?
Okay. It was, hear me out. I think
work
I need
through
to
it.
like
Let's work through it.
Like work through this one. Because I think the guilt was, if I don't perform and I don't succeed at this job, I'm going to make my parents look bad.
Yes.
And specifically like my dad, because I feel like when I was younger, he poured everything into me. Because his parents didn't. Like he would take me to like tennis and swimming and chess and English and French. And I was like, I had so many activities. And he was like, I'm going to give you this opportunity because nobody gave it to me. He used to say, your grandfather didn't even like come to any one of my soccer games. So that's his trauma being projected onto me. And then I carry guilt because I'm like, well, my dad has poured all of this time and energy into me. I must succeed to make him feel like all of that effort was worth it.
So what's the enmeshment there, and what's the enmeshment with your mom? How could you define the guilt with your mother in regards to this, the performing in the
Well, the performing with her was for acceptance,
right? So
because it's always about, I think they don't know this, but subconsciously
let's
that's
just gear it more towards the mother wound than it is towards the father wound.
I know the guilt.
Right? The guilt is like, it makes sense for you to outperform because you want to make your parents feel validated for their own childhood and their own experiences
and their choices and all of that. Right.
However, with your dad, there was acceptance there. Like he still accepted you for you and did what you needed to do. Whereas your mother, there was more criticisms there, right?
Yeah.
So if we're looking at that, this is why I said whenever I'm looking at the enmeshment wound, I'm always looking at more in relation to your relationship to your mother.
Right.
And so I get that. It's not to say that you wouldn't have that him projecting his ideas and his views on like what would make you successful. And like, I didn't have these things, so I want to give you these things too. Absolutely. There's an element of that.
Yeah, but let's go back to, so guilt with mom.
With guilt with mom.
But hold on. So this is so messed up. It's not, I really have to like feel through this. So
that's why I said people don't register how they self-abandon because this is where it comes from.
Right. So if I'm putting so much into my work, it's because I need that validation externally. The guilt that comes with that, but why would I feel guilty if I do that? If I don't do that, I guess would be the question, right? Like, what is my guilt if I'm not constantly excelling and performing in my career? Yeah, it's almost like I am then a failure. And I let her down, and there is like no acceptance or validation of my existence as a person.
Right. So what do you think your personal boundary is?
Is that work doesn't define me?
Sure, that's an aspect of it, but let's go a little deeper because you said something very interesting. I don't exist. Right.
There's like, it's like, it's almost like, well, what the fuck did I bring you here for? Like that's extreme.
Yeah, but it's true. But this is what I'm trying to make you understand. That's how enmeshment operates. And to the degree where you're willing to abandon all parts of yourself to prove to her why you exist.
Right.
And you know this because you've had situations happen in your life most recently where you literally like your whole world stopped to go run to cater to, and now you're feeling guilty for, and that's the enmeshment, right? Like you're like, oh my God, I gotta, and it's not to say guys that you can't be there for your parents. That's not what we're communicating, but we're specifically talking about enmeshment trauma. When we're talking about enmeshment trauma, you will not have boundaries, and those self boundaries you will violate. And so you got to get very clear about what you feel guilty about, because the moment you can identify that deep wound, that guilt, then you have the ability to then set a clear personal boundary that you will never violate yourself. Of course, the one main boundary could be like, I'm not going to abandon myself. That's very evident. And you could like look at that and how you do that in so many ways. And it's very sneaky too, because even when you think you're not abandoning yourself, you could still be doing something that's causing the abandonment.
So is the boundary more like specific then?
Well, you said, I don't want to exist. You said, I feel like there's an aspect of me that doesn't exist. What would be the personal boundary?
Well, it has to do something.
I have the right
to exist regardless.
I have the right to exist regardless of what's going on inside of me.
Yeah.
Imagine that now is your new defining perspective. How would that then lead in your life and in your relationships and in your experiences?
Well, it's interesting. This just clicked because it's directly related to perfectionism, because perfectionism is the same thing. I have to be perfect to exist.
Of course.
And this is, I can exist regardless.
But then how does that play a role in why you're not connecting with certain types of relationships?
Because if I'm not perfect, then
I don't exist. I can't be in a relationship.
I can't be in one. Like
do you see what you're putting out into the universe?
Yeah. Oh, right? Yeah.
So that's now defining your way. And this is like where you're saying, well, it's not just like anxious non-attachment
or whatever. Yeah.
It's deeper than that. It's a deeper level than just that aspect, because it really is about you being so enmeshed with your mom and her perspectives and her moods and her ways of operating and her thought patterns and her criticisms. And now you've identified it deep within your core that there's an aspect of you that there's no reason for me to exist, even though my father gave me 101 other reasons as to how I could exist, right? Like he's shown me ways that I could exist, but then that led so much in the masculine that there wasn't any softness for you to lead into the feminine, for you to kind of allow yourself to have these healthy types of relationship dynamics.
Right.
To layer on top of that, then we go into, how do I protect myself?
Right. And then that's where like the judgment and the rejection of others, like I'll just reject you, or maybe like I won't go on that date, or like I'm not interested, or I'd see like the photo and I'm like, bleh.
Yeah, or I can't eat the food. I don't want, what was it? I don't want my fruit to touch was it you or was it Yelena?
Yes, I can't have my fruit touch my eggs, man.
It's like it has to be separate. I'm like, okay, which is fine.
I know, that's where that's but those harsh so that's the coping mechanism then. So to go back to the 3-step process, so it was identifying the need.
Always first identifying
how you abandon yourself.
Then it goes into your needs. Okay, what the needs are in the circumstances of the self-abandonment. Then it goes into, what do I feel guilty about?
Right.
And then once you go into, I register what I feel guilty about, then you then have the opportunity to then educate yourself and set a very clear personal boundary. And that personal boundary then literally is so connected to your core belief systems. And when we unravel our core belief systems, we could do a whole other episode on core belief systems. However, just to kind of touch on that topic for a second, when you identify your core belief systems, then you have the opportunity to then say, okay, I now know why I self-abandon.
Right.
But these are the boundaries that I'm not going to violate within me.
So then the boundary is,
I have a right to exist.
I have the right to exist regardless, no matter what.
No matter what the circumstances are. And you will never abandon that.
Right.
Because that's what you've been doing.
Right.
Because like it's identifying the abandonment, the behavior, the action. Why am I doing that? I'm doing that because of this. And now if I identify why I'm doing this, then I have the opportunity to go, okay, well, why am I operating with guilt or people pleasing? What's happening
Why
here?
do I need to be seen as perfect in everybody else's eyes? And it's like, no.
Yeah. 100%. Right. Yeah. So that's kind of where like that behavior, like that's just like a little tool that I want people to start to adapt to, because it's really going to help you understand how you are operating within yourself and what your experiences are. And then you have the opportunity to kind of change that way. And that's where you're going to be like, oh, I'm not abandoning that. So anytime you're in a situation where you feel like you can't be yourself, you can't exist in the circumstance, that's you abandoning yourself.
Right.
So then how would that lead in your life moving forward? What would that look like? It would look like dropping perfectionism. It would look like you leaning into relationships because you have the right to be in them.
Right.
You know, it would be like, I could take time off. I could do like, it starts to become mutable in so many different ways. And then it really does start to change your reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's true because I even see, like, I know that ironically, we used work as an example, but that's where I've done most of the work. And
yes, but that's why relationships have struggled for you as much as they have, and why you're not in a relationship, a long-term relationship. And that's one of those questions, right? That's questions like, but there's nothing wrong with you. So why are you not in a relationship? And the reality of the situation is this.
Yeah.
You abandon yourself because you fear that you can't exist even being in a relationship with someone. And that leads energetically, when we're talking about the laws of attraction here, what do you think is happening? You're literally reiterating that over and over and over. Subconsciously, that energy is moving outside of you, and that becomes your point of attraction. You can't exist in relationships. So therefore, where would the relationship be? How would it show up?
Nowhere. I would either attract the same cycles as like my
Which
mom.
goes back to the chaos, right? Because you're like, why do I keep attracting situations that are so chaotic and so crazy? Because you allow other people, because your mother taught you that dysregulation, prioritizing her moods, prioritizing the chaos, prioritizing all the things that she was going through became the main focus. And then you abandoned yourself so that you could just get
to manage the chaos. Because part of me can't even...
Also to just exist. You just were like, well, if I fix it, if I make her feel better, if I love her, if I show her all these things, which is what you've been doing in your relationship dynamics for quite some time.
Which is why I've attracted exactly those same types of...
This is where the enmeshment's coming from. And then eventually that becomes exhausting. Why would I want to keep attracting the same thing in these types of relationships? I would much rather be alone. That's why. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. But now if we understand that this is just enmeshment, then I could separate myself. These are your things. These are my things. These are your feelings. These are my feelings. I don't need to stop my day.
Because you're having a bad day.
Because you're having a bad day or you're in a bad mood.
Yeah. And I started to practice that in friendships.
Yes.
Because because when I had this realization, I'm like, well, hold on. Relationships are no different. Like a romantic relationship is okay in some aspects, yes, but like relationships are relationships. If I can have friendships who are also accepting and we can have conflict and resolve it and we can disagree.
Oh, yes.
And I can tell you no, and I can say, I'm not going to do this today. Or like, you know, I had someone, I think we talked about it recently, and they were like, oh, let's do this every single weekend. And I was like, I can't do that every single weekend.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, cool. No problem.
Yeah.
Right. But before, I would say when I was younger, or especially like I remember in high school, I had relationships where I would be like, no, I can't even tell my friend no.
Yes.
Because it would be like death.
Well, yeah, it would feel that way. But it would just feel like you would feel like they're abandoning you. Like, oh, okay, now they're not going to like me for...
Yeah, and then I'll have no friends.
Yeah,
that's the narrative.
Yeah, that is the narrative. That is a narrative. But as an adult, when you recognize these limits and you start to see that it's just enmeshment trauma, and then you get out of your people-pleasing tendencies and you identify your personal boundaries, then you have the opportunity to kind of be like, I'm okay with conflict resolving. I'm okay with saying no. I'm okay with and the people who register, they're like, that's cool. No problem. See you later. See you when I see you. It's not the end of the world.
And it's like normal. That's the thing. It's not the end of the world.
No.
Because it always felt like the end of the world because of the enmeshment.
Yes.
And I'm just like, oh my God, like.
Well, I get it because like I've been there too. My mom used to dictate a lot of these moods and behaviors in our childhood as well. Like it was a lot. There was a lot of extremes that happened. And I just was like, I just got to like manage this and be in this. And then I did that in a lot of my friendships too. And I was like, wow, I cannot believe like how much I've abandoned myself in these relationships, and then like also had so much backlash because of them, because like it becomes too much. And then it was like, I literally cannot do this anymore. Like this doesn't feel good. I feel like I'm self-abandoning, and I really need to sit and pause and assess how much I've self-abandoned, and then recognize, oh crap, this is just the enmeshment wound. And these are the dynamics that I registered for my mom. And now I have to like, let this go. I have to figure this out from a different perspective. And then that's when my relationship started to change, because because I was always like, okay, what can I do for you? How can I help you? How can I make this better for you? And I was like, nope, this is the boundary.
If you don't like it, you can go
this is a
whatever.
boundary.
Yeah.
You know, and two, I get it because the work that I do, everybody is like, we're having conversations, we're talking about things, but it's like, just book the appointment. Like when it comes to the, when it comes to the emotional stuff that you want to work through the book, but if you want just my advice as a friend, it's a whole other conversation. And I had to learn how to create that separation, because then I'd get lost in it.
Yeah, and I'm sure some people didn't like it.
No, a lot of people didn't.
And
but that's because those people
right.
loved the fact that I had no boundaries.
Right.
They enjoyed the fact that I had no boundaries. They enjoyed the fact that I was reactive. They enjoyed the fact that I was dysregulated. They enjoyed it because it fueled their own narrative about their own experiences. And that was what it was at that time.
Right.
But that's emotional immaturity. The better you get at becoming emotionally mature, registering what your personal boundaries. Everyone's like, I'm putting up a boundary with somebody outside of you. It's like, okay, but I register that you're putting a boundary up with me. But have you registered what your personal boundaries are within yourself so that you don't violate that over and over again and then get upset at me when you said yes when you meant no? It's also not fair on the other end too. Like, people who have this enmeshment trauma, they're assuming that they're putting up a boundary. We've talked about trauma responses as boundaries versus them assessing and working through the trauma and saying, this is where I'm at. This is where it's coming from. This is what I need to do for myself. This is my boundary for myself. And so it gets easier because the better the better you set the internal boundary, like you have a reason to exist and do what you need to do. Then it becomes easier to say no. It becomes easier not to go to that activity. It becomes easier when you want to do that thing.
Right.
All of those experiences become your internal compass, and then you're navigating your reality based on what feels right for you. You won't self-abandon.
Right.
That's what leads.
Yeah. And there was another last thing that you mentioned, I think last time when we talked with this trauma. It's like you're automatically assuming that you can't conflict resolve. So you're like, either like avoid the person or like cut them off or like just make assumptions, when it's like, no, okay, if I'm like if somebody invites me to do something and I'm like, oh, it's like, why do I have this reaction?
Right, the judgment.
Right? It's like this judgment. It's like, am I just assuming that they're going to force me to go? Like, am I just assuming that they're going to get upset if I say no? So just chill the fuck out, figure it out, and then have the conversation. And if they make you feel guilty for not coming because you're exercising an actual boundary, then that's a problem. Then you know where to put them.
But then it's also having that conversation with them.
Right.
Then you
After
could
the
say,
conversation.
hey, I noticed that you got a little upset or reactive. Like, what are your feelings about this? That's where the conflict resolve comes in.
Right.
And then that gives the opportunity to say, okay, now if they come at you aggressively, then you could say, oh, no, this isn't a relationship that I want to be in. And like, I register how much I stayed in it because I didn't want to abandon that. Right. And so that gives you the false sense of connection. But in respect to it, it's almost like, hold on a second. Let's sit down and talk about what the situation is.
I'm
and like
saying
how
no
you
because
felt.
of this, and I don't want you to think that I'm saying no because of like, my no is because I'm trying to honor my own boundaries. It doesn't mean something negative about you.
I think people who are comfortable with conflict resolve don't have an issue when someone says, I'm so sorry, I can't do that, or this doesn't feel like whatever. It's like, okay, thank you for being honest with me. That's fine.
No, totally. I mean, I think you're pretty good at understanding these things. Like, I remember even like last weekend, I was out 3 nights in a row and I'm like, oh man, I'm 40. Like, I can't do shit like this anymore. But I know, like, to add to one of my other personal boundaries is 7 to 7.5 hours of sleep a night.
Yeah.
If possible.
Yeah.
Because I know that if I don't get that, the next morning I'm grumpy, I have a headache, my back hurts. That's how I know I've abandoned myself. Like, that low back pain comes up. I'm like, I can't function, especially if I have work the next morning. It's like, I'm sorry, I have to say no to your event or your outing or whatever, or I have to leave early because I have to function the next morning. And I remember often feeling guilty because people would say, oh, there she goes. She's the first one to leave. They called me Cinderella once because I would leave, like, I would dip out just before midnight. And I'm like, you know what?
Listen,
it is what it is.
I do that too. And for me, it's also too, because like I get so overwhelmed with like everyone's energies and like being a psychic and an intuitive, it's very difficult being in certain environments. I've gotten better, but I also have to register too. It's hard for me. I also have dyslexia, which makes directions very difficult. We know this.
I'm on the northwest corner.
Like I know my left to my right, okay? Like I'm fully aware.
like, I don't know where you're
but when you're like, go to the southwest corner, I'm like, I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. But also I don't drive the highway because there's an anxiety. It's actually a thing. So there's an anxiety of getting on the highway for me and like not feeling a way out. Like knowing that the exit's going to be...
Is that part of the enmeshment trauma?
Oh, 100%.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Yeah. It's like I have like a big thing with that. Like there's no way out.
So
like my mom was like, oh, she'd get all like bent out of shape and whatever. And I'd be like, there's no way out of this.
So that's how you feel on the highway?
So like the anxiety, even motion sickness. So I get really, really bad motion sickness, but because of the extremes of all the emotions that were going on in my environment, it throws me off. So travel's really big for me. We know this. We've had this conversation. It's fine. You can laugh about it. It's okay. But in reality, that's the truth. I can't get on the highway to drive to somebody, even if like I've learned how to get to your place through the city, let's say. If one thing changes, it throws me off completely. And it's not because I'm trying to be reactive or dramatic or any of that. It's literally because my brain, because of the PTSD that I have and the experiences that I've gone through, my brain can't process it. And if that's my biggest issue, then so be it. Do you know what I mean?
Whatever.
Like it is what it is. But I've had literally people get offended.
Because you don't drive the highway?
Because they're like, well, I'm always coming to you, but you're never coming to me. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. I'm not trying to do that like on purpose. I'm genuinely it's going to take me 4 hours to get to you. Is that what you want right now?
No.
When it's going to take you 20 minutes. And then I have really great people in my life. They're like, I don't care. I don't mind driving. It's not a big deal for me. I put on a podcast. I listen to your podcast or I'm doing like even Soul Thrive stuff in the car. I love the drive. It's like, and they like love it as their haven and then they come see me and it feels really good. But I had to respect those personal boundaries for me. And I'm like, and I've had people try to push me to do things I don't want to do. And I'm like, and when I did, I regretted it. And I was like, why did I do that? I did that because that pleases your narrative. It doesn't please my narrative.
Right. So I'm going to send you that Instagram meme that goes, me going to another city because I couldn't switch lanes in time.
That's so true.
That would be
me. It's like that girl. I saw it.
I sent it to my other friend Anya too because she's the same. I love it.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
All right.
Thanks guys for tuning in at the Soul Thrive podcast. This was fun. Have a great day.